Folks, we are live. Welcome to Talking Crit, a very special Talking Crit. Before I introduce our special guest, I'm going to tell you who we have. Uh, you know who I am. So I'll skip me. Bad Mike is my once a week work spouse. Today he is sitting below me.
Yeah, he kicked me out for Dan. Wow.
Yeah, what can I say? A little bit
awesome.
younger. Next to Mike is Jim Kitchen, auctioneer extraordinaire. And our very special guest tonight is the one and only Dan, aka Professor DM. This is our panel. Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. It's terrific to be here because I'm such a big fan of the Tavern for a long time, and we're friends IRL.
Yes,
but I've never been on the show before.
No,
and kids and your acronyms.
And your timing as well, because the channel hit 15,000 subs yesterday, so it's a milestone. It's a small one, but we're working on it.
We only paid for like a third of those.
Yeah.
Hardly any of those. Yeah. Very, very few were bought from small Asian countries.
The Malaysian subscribers are just
that's just a bit.
God, I've been sending those $100 checks to Vietnam. What's going on, man? You didn't tell me we were going Kuala Lumpur. You're killing me.
In any case, folks, we're here to talk with Dan about Deathbringer, Gen Con, the Ennies, and so much more. So at this, damn, our chat's very chatty today. Thank you, folks. Jim, I'm going to give you the floor for now.
Me?
Yes, you.
Man, I hardly have a voice left after Gen Con.
But, I know. I figured where you are.
This is just cruel. All right. So, Dan, welcome aboard, right? Number one, I think we are all thrilled to have you here. You had me at Deathbringer, right? And I think that first of all, we can't say it that way. We have to say it like Deathbringer. Because that's really, with a word like Deathbringer. So I'm sure you're doing a lot of these, right? And I'm sure that they sort of get a little cliched over a while. What do you want to talk about first? Do you want to talk about the journey to Deathbringer? Do you want to talk about the fact that you've managed to get all these disparate spirits in the third-party publishing world to come together on Deathbringer? Or do you want to talk about the Ennies? What we're pretty casual, and
yes.
At the same time, I think we also ask questions that a lot of people don't because they're afraid to. So what do you want to talk about, Dan?
You can hit me with anything, and I want everybody out there to know that I didn't get the questions in advance, and it is no holds barred.
Oh.
No holds barred. The only thing I would ask you to avoid is my relationship with Lana Del Rey. I want to keep that private. It's been a very difficult time.
She wrote "Summertime Sadness" about you, Dan. Isn't that enough?
I can't.
I feel bad for you. I feel so much sadness for you, and really and truly, it's Lana Del Rey's loss. It's not your loss. So,
Dan, as Jim is very fond of asking most of the times, why don't you give us an elevator pitch for Deathbringer?
Yes.
I'm sitting here looking at
elevator pitch.
What 1.1 million? 1.1 million. I'm looking at.
No. Don't pat it with all the obvious things.
And I'm just thinking, well, is there somebody there that hasn't got in on this yet? And what would it take to get them in on this? So go ahead and elevator pitch me, as I haven't given you any money yet. So you're going to have to talk to me, Dan, and convince me to buy Deathbringer here.
Deathbringer is Moldvay D&D written through the lens of Savage Sword of Conan, Heavy Metal Magazine, and Thundar the Barbarian.
Stop. 1 minute.
Yeah.
Okay, we can go on.
That's the pitch.
They'll get so excited, yes.
It's completely compatible with Shadowdark and all OSR games. If you like Shadowdark, you're going to love Deathbringer because what it's going to give you is more classes and even darker magic and more critical hit tables and more of the stuff you got with Shadowdark. That's why it's compatible. And you're just getting more in a post-apocalyptic world. So that's what it is.
So now the titular class, the Deathbringer, tell us a little bit about that, because the thing I want to lead up to is the mechanic, right? Where when you die, you get stronger. So sort of how did this all come about? Is this, you sort of look at how the hero never dies in comic books and think there's a way to actually incentivize this, or use this as a mechanic? How did you get to that?
Well, the Deathbringer class, the Deathbringers are a group of a cult of alchemically enhanced super warriors, and their only goal is to go out and find a mighty death in battle. And they have a couple of cool mechanics, actually. You get these Deathbringer dice, right, which are like mastery dice in 5.5, if you know that game. And you get this pool of skull dice, these six-sided. You can add to a d20. You can add it to your damage. You can add it to, you can subtract from incoming damage against you, and you use them after you make rolls, right? So they're really powerful.
Sure.
And that's a cool mechanic because it allows you to do tons of cool stuff. The thing about 5th edition I don't like is the cognitive overload with all these feats and stuff. 90% of the feats, they're going to increase your chance of doing something with the 20-sided die, or they're going to do additional damage. So we give you this pool of flexible dice so that if you want to make a backstab, you can. If you want to rage like a barbarian, you can. If you want to jump over a chasm just when you need to, you could do that. And you don't have to stop the game to look up the rules, because I hate
Sure.
a very slow game. So there's that mechanic. You can actually you could spend one of those Deathbringer dice, if you're a Deathbringer, to make an extra attack. And Deathbringers can cleave, which is like a 3rd edition feat, where if you drop an opponent, you can attack another opponent.
Sure.
So you could just go hacking your way through opponents. We also have exploding dice, right? So if you roll the top number on your damage die, you roll the die again. There's just so much death and destruction, and it's so fast.
So I like that. I like that for a lot of reasons. Number one, it avoids what I always call the Pathfinder problem, which is, let me look at one of the 32 books I brought to the game and try to find the rule that encapsulates this exact scenario. And it just wastes time for everybody, and it takes everybody else at the table into a sort of a coma-like state while you're trying to find the answer or solution to resolving that. I really, really enjoy that, and I think that's absolutely the right approach. And what I'm hearing is you can just chain these things into just a series of attacks that your Deathbringer brings death, pardon me, for exactly the same way we do see in Thundar, right? When 6 rat mutants attack him, he doesn't engage one and then engage another. It's just a giant melee brawl with Ukla cheering him on from the side. And so is it one of those things where, I mean, you've spent 15 years giving advice, right? You spent 15 years trying to sort of help people and help them find their way to being better game masters, better dungeon masters. Is this something where at the 20,000 foot level, you just took a look at the tabletop and said, right, like, I don't want to be a part of this problem, or I don't want to bring this to my game? Is that sort of how this came about? Give an idea.
I hate playing in boring games.
Oh,
Dungeons and Dragons can be like super exciting, and a lot of times high level. I just played with Mike Merles and Joe Manganello. High level game, 10th level game, lots of fun.
And is this the death saves on Friday? Did you play
death saves on Friday? Lots of fun because everybody came correct and knew what they were doing. But I've also played some really boring, draggy games of Dungeons and Dragons, and I like my games to be faster, right? Like when I'm playing with my friends, it's rules light. We want to play the whole session with about 3 combats in 2 hours. The Odyssey is terrific. If I can't make a game that's better than the Odyssey, it's 3 hours long. If I can't make a game better than that, like, what are we doing?
Right.
So now if you do like playing all weekend long, I understand that, but I don't have the attention span for that. So
and it's stamina. Like, it's supposed to be a game. It's supposed to have your session should have a finite beginning and an end, and it shouldn't be an endurance contest. It's not a marathon. When I worked at Games Workshop, one of the things we always try to tell retailers is that games should be fast, fun, and furious, right? And the first one should be fun, but they should go quickly because I think, and we've talked about this on the show ad nauseum, where we talk about how Pathfinder trained people to sort of look for a rule for every situation versus particularly D&D, AD&D, the Molde, BCMI, etc. This all was wing it, right? Go with your gut, come up with a number, roll a die, see how it works, tell the player what to roll, and just keep the party moving forward. Not necessarily in a railroad fashion, but keep them moving through the adventure versus, hey, we might as well take a 20-minute break and go smoke some cigarettes because John is still trying to resolve his combat with 3 kobolds. And it just drives us all nuts, right? So
Yep.
So when did Deathbringer really come to be? Like, when was it that it coalesced as an idea and you thought, this is marketable, this is something that I want to spend the next couple of years writing and getting ready?
Cool. Before we do that, you want to talk about, can I talk about the death mechanic?
Sure, have at it. Like you're our
So-
guest, Dan. Why don't you talk
So-
about the things you'd like to talk about?
Well, we'll get to that, but that's an interesting question as well. But before I forget, and people are like hitting us up the end, what about the death mechanic? So I don't like waiting my turn, and I don't like death saves in 5e because you're just like lying on the ground and you're not doing anything. All you're doing is rolling not to die, so you're really not participating in the game. So what I did is I created a mechanic where you go down, you pop up the next round with 1 hit point, and you get to choose from a list of premium talents, which are feats, but in Shadowdark you call them talents. And they do really cool things like increase your damage die. You might get an extra attack.
Right.
And you get that power. You get a scar, which you get to choose. You might lose a hand or an eye or an ear or whatever. It's not going to affect your character. But you pop up the next round, 1 hit point, and you got this premium talent, and you immediately get back into the action. And you can do that twice and accumulate 2 premium talents, and then the third time, your character actually dies. But you're dragging your guts around, and you get to do 1 last action on which you're going to score an automatic critical success, right? So that might be jamming your sword through a dragon's throat, or rescuing the prisoner at the last second, or you and the bad guy stab each other. And the reason I did that is because not only do I love Dungeons & Dragons, but I love classic literature like Beowulf. Beowulf dies fighting the dragon, but he takes the dragon out at the same time. Right. That is a heroic death. You know, D&D, modern D&D, it's often described as a heroic fantasy game, right? And the characters have unbelievable hit points, and there's unbelievable access to healing. They're always healing their hit points. And when I criticize and I say it's too soft, people's like, well, you know, it's a heroic game. Heroic doesn't mean you never die. Heroic means your character is brave and willing to sacrifice themselves for others. And if you do go out in Deathbringer, you're going to go out like a boss and have an epic ending. And then you're just going to start your new backup character.
And I think that's an important part of this, right? That the greatest RPGs are collaborative. The greatest game sessions are collaborative storytelling, where at the end of the night, you have shared experience that you will spend the next few decades talking about that one time that you managed to get the critical hit. I had something like that at Gen Con this year. Strangely enough, I actually had a 1 in 500 roll of 3 dice. I got 2 10s and a 9. And literally in an hour and a half game session, 15 minutes into it, I killed the monster. And with Kingdom Death, like, it's graphic about how I killed the monster. I literally hit it in the swimsuit area and ripped off the things in the swimsuit area and killed it dead. And everybody at the table is like, well, what are we going to do for the next hour 15, right? But it's not like a scripted event, but it just happened, and everybody has continued to talk about this. And I like the idea that you're crafting your own epic. You know, while you were talking, I thought about, everybody sort of poo-poos it, but I love the 13th Warrior. And I love how at the end of the movie, Bolvi dies content that they have driven the Vendel back. They've killed the mother. They've killed the father of the tribe. The tribe is in ruins, and they flee. And Bolvi dies a hero, having led the charge against evil. And he can die content, and he will go to Valhalla. It's one of those same sort of similar moments, and you want your characters to have that. And if you're going to have a character die, isn't it far better they die like that than under a net with with caltrops and kobolds swarming them. Like
Jim, I'm just happy to know that you ruined everybody's game of Kingdom Death at Gen Con. They probably waited all year to play.
Yeah, there were 3 other people at the table, and they were just like, he killed him, and he's dead.
It's supposed to last like an hour and a half combat.
That's right, and just like boom out of the game. And the guy running it goes, well, that's never happened before. And I was like, sorry about that. So how did this come to be? Like, when did you think to yourself, I've got this seed of an idea and I just have to plant this and let it go? Because my God, man, you're not just a solid oak tree. Like, you're at this point at $1.1 million. You're a forest. You're a thick, hardy grove of hardwood ready to go forward. So when did it really sort of coalesce for you?
It happened piece by piece. All right. So the first step was I started a Patreon,
right,
for my channel, and my patrons, supported me, and they kept on asking, when are you going to print your house rules? And so that was the genesis of it. My patrons encouraging me, and then Hanker Infernal over at Runehammer, he said, I'm going to take out your house rules and we're going to make it a trifold. And we're going to put up on Drive-Thru RPG. It's going to be like a folding menu with a 1-page game on it. And I said, cool. And then it didn't go to number 1 on Drive-Thru, but it did go to number 2. And it's one of their best sellers ever. It's Adamantium or whatever. It's still in the top 40 of games under $5. Like, it just kept selling and selling and selling. And people loved it. So at that point, I was like, okay, well, maybe I ought to develop this into a full-fledged game, because that's what Dungeon Dudes did with Dungeons of Dragonheim. It's what Matt Colville did with Draw of Steel. It's what Kelsey did with Arcane Library, and she made Shadowdark. I was like, well, this is the path, right? You're a YouTuber, you get an audience, and then you put out your own game. And that's what did it. And
so what I'm hearing is you're following the established channel, and it was just a matter of time.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, but that is what happened.
This is clearly the 21st century path of progression, right? You get the Patreon, and you've got the YouTube channel, and then magically the game appears, and it does $1 million. And I mean, you obviously had all the pieces in play behind the scenes, right? I missed the 48 hours with the statue, and I weep bitter tears over this, but I was heavily medicated, as other people on the show can testify.
Yeah, that's a weekly thing.
It was a weekly thing for a while. So with the death dice mechanic, do you feel like that gives a lifeline to the players that sort of takes some of the finality out of the true death they face? Do you think that mechanic sort of tempers that a little bit? I was looking at that, and I wanted to ask you about that, because I don't think it's a Hail Mary play, but at the same time, it's sort of it's lingering in the back of the mind that there is a way to sort of hold on a second. I don't want to lose this guy just yet. There are still sagas to write.
Those death dice will make it so you're not going to fall down a 10-foot pit and die.
Gotcha.
On first level.
Right.
Most of my players do save them. Although when I play, I use them right away.
Right. What's the point?
Because a monster that is dead cannot hit you at all. My players have played with these for years. I think a couple of them are watching now. Now they'll finally figure it out. A monster that's dead can't attack at all. So I would probably use them to like make a massive attack. If I ever got a natural 20, I would boom, use them all at once. But you can use them to protect yourself, and your character will live to fight another day. So I like that spongy element. It's like a narrative element. And the first game to do that was James Bond 007 by Avalon Hill with the hero point concept.
Was that Kickian or Stackpole? I can't remember.
They were the
RPG. I'm sorry, that came later. That was the RPG.
Klug. The guy that wrote it was Klug. And he wrote James Bond 007 from Victory Games, which is a division of Avalon Hill. And that was the first one. That hero point was the first meta currency where you could use it to manipulate the success and save your character, because you are the main character. And I love that mechanic. I love narrative mechanics, but I also love old school D&D because it's just
Right.
the simplest and fastest. So I had to marry the two.
So with scarification, I mean, Dan, this screams for an elaborate tale or a table, so that as this happens, their name becomes also a title of the very things that they have somehow managed to miraculously survive, right? That it would be Ivar of the missing ear and the severed shin, or like I almost feel like I'm going to invoke this, and I'm sorry, right? I feel like you can show me on the doll where this hurts you, but I feel like there's some almost like you could sneak in some elements of claw law, because anybody under 25
I
years
knew
old
Rollmaster was going to come. I knew
will
this was
not
coming.
understand the pain and
Oh, boy.
suffering of
Here we go.
Rollmaster. But you could do just enough to scare them, right? Like scars or tattoos with better stories. But really and truly, I feel like you've got the potential there. I like how all three of you just were like, "Oh God, no! Don't sell me. It will
Rollmaster.
appear.
Well,
It
well,
will
we used to
appear."
have a house rule when I was a kid, Jim and Dan and Eric. When you went negative in 1E and you got healed up, you had a scar, and we let the player choose the scar, and they had a blast with that. And so I think it's awesome that you make that part of the game now, because it's something players like. They like walking around with a big old scar across their face, or missing 3 fingers on their right hand. It's a whole element of play, and I mean, my players loved it, and I wish the game had included that as an official rule. And here we are. And so I think that's a great mechanic.
So there's no magical healing, but who's our Princess Ariel? Like, give me an idea of the sort of Princess Ariel sidekick powers. What fits that role? You summoned Thundar, and yea, verily, I will milk this for all it's worth. So what else should I know?
Princess Ariel would be a Doom Scribe. So the Doom
Ah,
Scribes are the wizards, and they don't get spells because they level up. They have to find the spells. They have to find them in libraries and in crypts and on scrolls. And when you get a new spell, you put the incantation on, you tattoo it on your skin so that you can
love it.
read it. Right.
Excellent.
And when you cast a spell, and so the more spells you get, the more tattoos you have. But here's the problem: when you roll a 1 and you get a miscast, it can affect the environment. Like all the rations and milk may spoil, like in the dungeon.
Sure.
But also within 1 mile distance, you can get a result like all the crops within a 1 mile distance fail, or all the fetuses within a 1 mile distance shrivel and die in the womb. So,
well, there's
so
our light, happy, fluffy unicorn chasing game, Dan. That's spectacular. The kids are gonna love this.
So as a result, people hate wizards and will hunt them down. And the more powerful your wizard, the more spells they have visible, the more people will want to kill them. And that answers a question which I've always wondered about these games, especially 5e, where out of something like 13 or 14 official classes, 12 of them have spellcasters. They have a spellcast subclass, a spellcaster subclass. Everyone can cast a spell. So here's the question. How is there just a normal king? Like, why haven't the elves who live forever and can all be spellcasters, why haven't they taken over every country? They live longer and they can outstrip humans in terms of power. Like, what check and balance is there for a world that has magic in it? So I've created one. It's there, but it's destructive potentially, and people will hate you. So it balances it out.
So can tattoos overlap? Now that's a question that I'm asking that because I'm assuming the highest level of wizards look like a AAA roadmap triptych, and I'm assuming that these, but is there consequences for overlap? Like if somebody gets to a certain level where they're covered in these spells and the chances of an overlap increase, are there problems, or are there the unholy combination of spells? Like, do you address that? I'm just mildly curious.
I don't address it. It's just you become more recognizable to all the non-magic users, and you also become a target for other Grim scribes, because if you've got that many tattoos on you, they'll want to kill you for your spells and take your skin.
Right. Right. So now you say post-apocalyptic. Is it a defined apocalypse or a vague historical thousands of years ago? Is it a racial memory? What is your setting, Dan?
It's a magical comet smacked into the once great civilization now known as the Shattered Empire. And
Okay.
it took down the civilization, and it scattered all these little bits of meteorite all over the world. And these bits of meteorite are called moonstone, and they have mutagenic effects. They will turn humans into monsters, which explains what are orcs? Why are giant spiders in this world? They are mutants, right? Orcs are mutated pigs. They mutated right from the pig pen. They're not human at all, but they became bipeds because they mutated, and that forms a verisimilitude. It's like a logical reason for me that this world became the world that it became.
So you listening to it's interesting because you've taken a lot of what made Shadowdark successful, and you've combined some of the things from what I think I don't want to say old school gaming, but let's call it pre third edition Dungeons and Dragons, or what most people sort of refer to in that area. What are the things that you just were like, I don't want any part of the original OD&D or AD&D experience. I don't want any part of that in my game. Is there anything you tried purposely to avoid? You talked about feats, and I understand exactly what you're saying about 5th edition feats, which just, they make me want to pull my hair out. Here, let me look this up because I can find this. Hold on a second. Oh, wait, it's 2 pages over. Hold on. I got the table. Let me roll the dice. 1 second. Oh, wait, I got it. I've got my modifiers. Don't forget about my modifier, and then you're just lost. So what did you pull that? What did you avoid from like old school gaming that you just did not like or didn't want to bring into Deathbringer?
Weapon speed factors.
Right. Oh, God bless you.
I mean, I asked Luke Gygax, did your dad play with the weapon speed factors? And he said no. That was done to make war gamers happy. Right, because they were very historical. Also, negative hit points. I don't think that was a great mechanic. I don't think the death saves is in 5th edition is a great mechanic. I don't think we've had a great mechanic. I think the death stuff can always be improved. I also think that you want from OD&D, there's probably too few classes. And it's very, very. Deathbringer is more spongy. Early D&D is very strict. You have 6 hit points. You hit 0 hit points, you're dead. Where I think a spongier game, like James Bond 007, where you get the game master, the players can manipulate the rolls. They get a pool of dice to manipulate rolls. It's just more fun. So you want to take the lethality and the monsters and the simplicity, but you want to add just one kind of cool mechanic that adds so much depth to it.
Right.
When did we first? I mean, this is for anybody, but when did we first get that mechanic? Because we first started playing back in 77, 78. When you died. And then it started creeping in slow that, well, if you get down to 0, you're just knocked out. And if you get negative, you can run over there and bandage. And now we have, 5th edition. Well, if you get like 5 saves here, and if you miss any one of those saves, and you get another save for that save, I mean, at this point, it's just, it's ludicrous. So when did we make that switch? Was that between 1st and 2nd? Was that between OD and 1st? I don't really even remember. It's kind of like the frog in the pot. It just started boiling, and before you know it, nobody was ever dying in games because there was so many mechanics there.
It's the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yep.
So
that's when we first got. We're gonna do this, and we're not gonna. You guys are so attached to your characters. We just can't bear to kill these guys. You can run over there and bandage them up.
Yes. Yeah, that's where it came from, and I think that was, in my opinion, Gary made 2 mistakes. It was that, and it was also there's a spread. Can a player character be a player play a monster? And he said, yeah, but you had to make that monster, equal to a first level character. I think that and probably the half orcs were a big mistake too. All of those things started chain reactions that would decades later they would cause problems.
They're the ripples in the pond, right? He wasn't thinking when he threw the rock, and now we all have to live with this, right? I'd like to have a half dragon, half. Yeah, okay, I'm done.
Right, yeah. That's where it started.
But it was that was the game back then, right? It was no holds barred, wild and crazy. You could have gunfighters. I mean, sci-fi. It was that way. And then once it came out with AD&D First Edition, he and Tim said, "Okay, we need a game that everybody can play at a convention that the rules are all the same. So we can't have half dragons. We can't have giant centipede player characters. We've got to codify this down." And as great as 1E, and I agree with you, great as 1E is, there's a couple of things that to this day I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to use that, or I wouldn't use it.
So when did you first start recruiting people for the project? I mean, is this something that it just sort of came up casually, or did you talk to a few select people to see if that would garner some interest for their participation? I mean, it's a pretty heavy hitting list. And I think anybody with a couple of brain cells to rub together can understand that your YouTube channel, where a lot of people tacked one way and kissed gloriously the ring of 5th edition, you made an effort to do other things and talk about other systems and talk about other people. How did that play into how Deathbringer came about?
I found a kindred spirit over at Runehammer with Hanker and Fernell.
Yeah.
And we watched each other's channels, and I had said that, and this is a good segue for later, that Dungeons and Dragons ought to have a hardcore mode. It ought to have a black label game that's for adult with tougher rules. And he watched that episode and he was like, it should. And he wrote a book called 5E Hardcore Mode, which became a huge bestseller. And it's a brilliant little book. And then that's how we became friends. And then he wrote Deathbringer for me into that trifold rule. And then I started expanding it. And one of my other patrons, James Michael Spahn, who we all know from the White Box Encyclopedia and in Barrel Rider games and a million other games, right? He said, I'd like a crack at that. So he took a pass at it. And then so he rewrote my script. I rewrote that. And then Runehammer rewrote that. And now it's with Mark Seifter, who wrote Pathfinder 2. And so I met all these people just through patronage and meeting them at conventions and vibing with them and connecting with them. So this is really a project that happened because of YouTube. If it weren't for YouTube, I wouldn't have met these people. I wouldn't have met Kelsey, who did Shadowdark. Right. So that's how it came. It came out of YouTube.
Go figure. I mean, honestly.
So when am I muted? Oh,
that's all right. It's probably for the better.
So I watched your play, one of your play sessions at Gen Con. It was really, really cool. I love the death dice thing, but when you first said, you know what, we're not going to have healing. How did your players and or people that you want to recruit for the game feel about that when they sit at the table and they're getting ready to go? And by the way, there's no healing at all. You're probably going to die a lot. I mean, was there just some kind of a weird reaction? I mean, people get up and leave. I mean, what was the whole thing?
So my secret is I recruit players that are not familiar with role-playing games. So they had no idea what they're missing. That's my secret.
That's such a great idea. Yes.
So many of my, then they have no preconceptions. I also onboarded a lot of them with Warhammer Fantasy role play back in the 90s, and they're just there's not as much magical healing in that game.
No, there is
very little.
Sorry. Dan, do you want my great joke? Would you like my great Warhammer fantasy
No.
roleplay joke?
Sure, shoot.
So, do you know how to tell between people who've played every other role playing game and people who've played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay?
How?
So, any other game system, you come to a door and somebody listens to the door or examines it for traps or whatnot. But you can always tell the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay survivors because when they get to a door, they pick the weakest party member. They rip the door open, throw the party member into the doorway, shut the door, spike it, and then they listen to see what happens on the other side.
Jeez, that is pretty brutal.
And it's not wrong. So yes, I like a game that has an inherent level of you can't just wish or ring or spell or potion your way out of your consequences.
I also prefer sword and sorcery fiction, and I prefer sword and sorcery games. Cleric is an invention of Dungeons and Dragons. It doesn't come from literature; it comes from the game, and that's great.
Right.
If you want to play Dungeons and Dragons, because it's early Dungeons and Dragons with Appendix N, it's so influenced by like Jack Vance and Dying Earth and Michael Moorcock and the little Tolkien and then Farvard and the Grey Mouser and they're all thrown in there. But now we've reached a point where many of the younger players who like got into the game in the last edition, they've never read those stories. No. Dungeons and Dragons is its own fantasy. The cleric is an archetype from Dungeons and Dragons. The idea of a healer has also infiltrated the culture of video games and stuff like that. But the problem is I want a sword and sorcery game. And the problem is if you have a healer that constantly restores the hit points, it's just like playing Monopoly and people who play it wrong. They if you land on free parking, you get all the money that everybody lost. I don't know if anyone ever played it that way. That's a fake house rule. Yep. And what it means is nobody ever goes bankrupt. And people, whenever
it's an endless lifeline. It's an endless lifeline.
I like Monopoly, and when people say, "Oh, I hate that game," it lasts forever. Inevitably, the first thing I ask them, "Do you play with the version on free parking where you get a bunch of money?" And they're like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "Yes, of course. The game would never end. It never ends. The purpose is to bankrupt people. A game of Monopoly should last 90 minutes, but it will last forever if you get your resources back. A game of Dungeons & Dragons, especially with the short rest and the long rest and the healing word and just at will healing, and you could drink a potion as a free action, which is a ridiculous rule. Like." That's my biggest problem with 5.5 is how could you make it easier? Like, what are you thinking? It's not fun if it's that easy. So, my rant. That's my rant.
Did you ever watch our show? If you watch our show, Dan, we rant about that quite regularly. So we're on your side here, Dan.
It's the baby bumpers down the lane when you're playing pool, or I'm sorry, when you're bowling. Like, what's the point, right? What's the point? And I hate this continuing scale of how far am I up, how far am I down, and my God, it's like accounting, right? It's like let's have an audit. This is delightful. I just love this. This is great. I love keeping track of all this, right? And I'll see something like I saw at Gen Con a slider for health points, and I thought if you have to have a slider for less than 20 health points, I don't even know how you count to 21 without taking your clothes off. Like I just have nothing. I've got nothing at all to understand that. It just drives me nuts. It just drives me nuts. So
was this a conscious reaction then to this kind of play? I mean, you see this 5e, and 5e was, I mean, obviously it's the most popular version of D&D ever written, and everybody's playing it. Did you like just sit there and go, there's just something I don't like this. I don't like the way these people are playing. And did you have people that came to you and said, "Hey, man, we want to do something different. If this is different than 5e, we're in."
That's how I felt. I think 5e is a very good game. I think the engine of 5e is excellent. It's an excellent engine. It's like once you throw all the other things on top of it, like the million feats and all these spells that are obviously imbalanced, and add healing and rests and all the other stuff on top of it, that it gets draggy. And I think people, I remember back in the 80s, people got mad their character died, so they quit the game and they never played again. 5e, I think you just get bored. You get bored of your character always winning and you quit the game. right? Which
Well,
is
I think too. I think as underlying Deathbringer, you have the hero of myth, right? There's a lot of Joseph Campbell here. There's a lot of what it is that makes up great mythology, what it is that gives us great archetypal heroes. Even one of the best RPGs that's ever been published, the Baron Munchausen game, right? Munchausen is still a hero. He overcomes these situations, not obviously covered from head to toe in gore, but still solves these things in a way that we talk about later on. And in hearing you talk about this, I think one of the things that I'm really struck by is that you're going to lose your Deathbringer. Your Deathbringer's fate is that he will die. What you're hoping to do is you're hoping to craft an adventure, a tale, where everybody else at the table will remember. Do you remember when Igley, the scarred, he of the deep gash in his forehead, took the dragon, slew the dragon, and also was choking a spider as it was choking him? And everybody will go, I do. I was there that day. I was one of the privileged few to watch as Igley slew the foe. And that's the thing we want. I mean, that's ideally when we create characters, we're not creating the mundane. We're trying to create somebody who's going to go out into the world that you've created and go do something heroic and make a difference and save the village and bring back the princess, et cetera, et cetera. And I agree with you. I think a lot of 5th edition, we railed one night about the WotC published adventure with Vecna.
Oh,
that what could have been
so terrible.
What could have been one of the single scariest, deadliest, dropping bodies left and right, and if you completed it, it would have been the modern equivalent of G123, D123, Q1. And instead, it was just a steaming, tepid mass of, And at the end, when you read it through to the very end, it's in fact the very last WotC product I bought. No, I take that back. I bought the one with the S3, the redo of S3. But I just remember that terrible, terrible Vecna book where you've set up this multiplanar conflict. I'm going to be going through all these different worlds, and I'm going to be doing. Our party is going to try to save it. And at the end of it, I felt like I had watched another episode of Perry Mason, and I was not surprised that Perry beat up the DA in court.
Eric gave me the PDF for that. I didn't ask Eric where he got the PDF, but he gave me the PDF.
It was an anonymous source.
Okay. And I read it, and I wanted to I was like, well, if this is a book, I'd throw it against the wall. I don't really want to break my computer. So
Sure.
I'm not going to throw my computer against the wall. But this was a missed opportunity, like you said, Jim, with the highest order. And I want to get Dan to redo Vecna Eve of Ruin with Deathbringer rolls, because it should have been a combat. It should have been just a knockdown drag out with Vecna. And you got a handful of guys with a handful of hit points at the end, and everybody's bleeding, and some people are missing their arms and legs. And instead, don't you like ring a bell 3 times or something? I mean, it's just
right.
So it's just really anticlimactic.
I do like the DCC funnel approach where you have 4 0-level characters or 5 0-level characters, and out of the ashes of what's left of your character sheets, one will rise to become a hero. I like that. I like the I'm the farmer and they burned my crops and all I have is my pitchfork and my straw hat. And oh, by the way, Ava Gabor is coming along with me because Green Acres. And I sort of like that kind of, I like that start, but I really, really, really want legend, right? Make one of the greatest titles of a book ever. I Am Legend. And I look at Deathbringer and that's what I think about. I am legend, right? If I strode into your village with my axe and everything about me, I should just see space opening in front of me, because yea, though I walk into the shadow of the valley of death, get the hell out of my way, because I'm here to solve your problem you couldn't solve, right? Get out of my way. Let's go. So
that's what I'm hoping for.
That's kind of Jim. Did you read a lot of David Gemmell? That's kind of David Gemmell's shtick, which is really good.
Yeah, he wrote Legend.
I mean,
he wrote
Legend. The book's called Legend. It's incredible. It's about Druce the Slayer, and he's got a big ass axe, and he walks around. Everybody's just like, "Whoa, hey, dude!" And every once in a while, somebody challenges him, and he's just like,
I'm
You
done
know,
with you.
yeah,
Right.
whatever. You know,
Well,
everybody-
this is like the wonderful samurai trilogy, the showdown at the temple, where finally, after the long hero's journey, he finally meets Musashi, and they have the fight that they are fated to have. And at this point, Musashi is the undisputed sword master of Japan. He's left a trail of bodies behind him, and I don't want to spoil the movie if you've never seen the movie, but it's just wonderful. This is this inherent swagger, Dan. This is what you've captured with your game. You have swagger, Dan. Look at you. You're leading the multitudes. And speaking of swaggering into something, let's talk about the Ennies.
well, first of
Well,
all,
that was a good
let's
transition.
start at the beginning. When did you get chosen to be the MC for the Ennies? Well, when did this come about?
Well, they asked me in about October, and Matthew Muth, who is his wife Stacy owns the Ennies. He's one of my patrons. A lot of this you could see happens through Patreon. And he contacted me and he said, "We'd love you to host the Ennie Awards. We really appreciate your love of independent games." And I said, "Cool," and I did it, and that's how it happened.
And then you were the year starts rolling up pretty good. You're picked as number one most looked forward to TTRPG of the year by End World. So wow, that's awesome. And you're going to MC the Ennies, which is cool. And then you launch your Kickstarter, and right off the bat, boom, you're on your way to $1 million. And then End World decides to kick you in the crotch. What was the deal with that? I mean,
I think they wanted to avoid people fighting about it, and I'm
Sure.
totally supportive. I'm totally supportive. I don't
I
want to be.
understand that, but isn't that why you have? Isn't that why you have moderators to knock those people out that are just saying ridiculous stuff? And isn't that the moderator's job to say, okay, enough? You need to get out of here. I mean, it's just kind of like, nope, not doing it, not dealing with it. Sorry, you're on your own, Dan. I'm out of here.
Well, I've been I have my own Deathbringer Facebook group. It used to be the Dungeon Craft
Yep.
Facebook group. Now it's so I have two moderators helping me, and it is kind of a pain in the butt. And I've noticed I'll do a video sometime, where once in a while where I'm critical of Wizards of the Coast. And I'll just shut down the comments. I'm critical of what they're doing, but I see like crazy things in the comments.
Yes.
And it's just like, you know what? Let's just stop it there, because I don't want to fight, and even the most innocuous comment can turn to a fight. So I don't want to be the source of any contention. And it's their website; they can do whatever they want. I think people know that
Absolutely.
Deathbringer exists, and
Oh, yeah.
you can go on the Deathbringer Facebook group and talk about it there. So it's cool. I have no problem.
Well, at that point, you'd made a cool $1 million, so you could afford to see you later. But I mean, I just thought we just thought it was funny because we're reading that going, okay, so this is the most anticipated TTRPG, and he's hosting the Ennies, and the Ennies just said, yeah, this is just too much trouble. We can't deal with this guy. This guy's disruptive. This is chaos. Oh my god! We've never had a complicated subject like this ever come up where we had to, I mean, it's just, I don't know. It just seemed a little. I don't know. I'm suspicious.
I think you nailed it, right? I think they don't need the headaches, right? I've been the admin of a group on Facebook now for 14 years, I think, and I saw it epitomized today. I had actually sent a note to Eric and Mike about somebody who was an old school game designer who was literally the guy standing in his front yard in his underpants yelling at clouds. And some of this is just where is this coming from? Like, I understand some of it, but then we get into like, I've got my white sketchboard and I've got the yarn and it's connecting the pictures of the cats and the semi truck and the black helicopters. And you just think it's time to back away. Like, it's just time to say, I need to stay off my keyboard.
I've been a member of Kelsey's Discord since the beginning, and she had a lot of issues like that when it first started because people are drawn to conflict, as we all know.
Right.
And of course, social media algorithms push conflict because that's how they get clicks. And so they did a really good job in the early days in the Discord of just saying, look, we're not going to have it. You're done. You're out of here. And they were very, very liberal about kicking people off. If you can't obey the rules, you're just gone. I thought that was good. That's a good way to deal with it.
It saves everybody time, because and this is my golden rule of moderation, right? I'm willing to give people a bad day, right? Everybody has a bad day sometimes. However, when your bad day becomes a screaming tirade and you become a poo flinging monkey, and there's no reasoning, right? Where you've muted them and you've taken it to private messaging and are like, hey, today would be a great day to go walk your dog, or take your cat out on a leash, or go for a drive.
Touch the grass. The grass needs to be touched.
Something.
That's got to be touched.
But when somebody truly demonstrates that they are a narcissistic, sociopathic, toxic dweller of the worst of the internet, the ban hammer strikes with a fury and swiftness that exceeds the speed of sound by 5 or 6 times. The magnitude is just immense. And once they're gone, they're like, I always say, I had one guy. He was a low-level independent publisher. He was from somewhere out in sort of the Spokane, Idaho area, and he was as nasty as could be. And when he said, you're going to ban me, and I said, I am. I'm going to ban you from the group because all you've brought is this terrible wave of negativity. And he went on and on about how his hundreds, like there were 2, but his followers would miss him and so on and so forth. And I said, in the universe that is our group, no one will remember you, and you will not be missed. And decade later, right? Like, there's nobody that invokes him. His stuff is no longer on Amazon. I have no idea what's happened to him, but he's not my headache, and he hasn't been my headache for 10 years, and I miss him not. And so I think Dan's right. I don't mind.
Okay. I mean, Dan's a classy guy. Jim or Eric and I, we have our problems, and we fly off the handle. But Dan is a very calm, cool, collected, classy guy. I've watched your videos a long time, so I knew you would handle this the way you did. But I thought it was so funny because I had a scenario where you walk in the Annies. You just do the double birds, and then you just walk. You say, "See you later, bitches," and just head on out.
I don't really see Dan doing that. Like, I'm sorry. First of all, he would have to have the gigantic puffy coat that lights up. I don't see that.
Lights, lighting up and with a little top hat and everything.
Not our guy on
and
that.
Just say, but
look at Dan now. He's sort of sad. Dan is
he's a classy guy. Come on, man. He's not going to do that. That's
so. How long did it take you to put together the project, like the statues and all the rest of it? Was it 6 months of sourcing, a year? How much? I mean, first of all, it's done, right? You've already baked the cake. It's ready to go off to press, which it's our number one golden rule of crowdfunding. Don't back something that's not written. Don't back something that hasn't been play tested or seen by other sets of eyes. So how long did it take you to sort of get everything ready for the launch point?
Just to jump back to N-World, before I leave that behind, I do want to say to their credit, I did an interview with them, and I don't know if it's been published yet.
It has.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So they asked me for an interview. This is just, they don't want people fighting in comments, and that's totally cool. I appreciate the interview.
Well, right? So Jim had a good point here, but I want to there's something real quick since we just went back to this. So the main issue, because I read all 25 pages of this because I love train wrecks.
Better you than me, Mike. Better than you than me.
And and so I'm watching this train wreck. Yeah. I do it, then I call Eric up and tell him what happened because he doesn't have to deal with 21 pages of train wreck. But nope. the main issue that people were freaking out about was chainmail bikinis. Like that, I mean, that was the one thing. It all went down to this one thing: is that how dare he have artwork that shows the female human body in this way? Is he serious? Is this a joke? I mean, is this satire? What's going on? And it went into like directions. Let's just say, for your own sanity, Dan, never look at these threads, because you'll lose brain tissue. It'll drip out of your ear. But it all boiled down to that one thing, and so it's everybody arguing whether this is something that you should have put in a game, whether you should have put in a game. What made you decide that this is something that I want to see in my fantasy art in my game? What led you to that?
Savage Sword of Conan and Heavy Metal Magazine back in 1984.
And my Savage Sword collection.
And I'm glad.
Hold on.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Red Sonja approves. That's all I have to say. Red Sonja approves. So we're good.
And
where's my Conan number one? Pull my Conan number one off the shelf there. Yes. Yes.
My wife pointed this out. We just went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Right? There, if you look at the ancient statues that the Greeks made and the Romans made of women, they're wearing far less than that.
Right.
Because it's a celebration of the human body. Right. So if you want to show if you look at Conan the Barbarian, the film, right, it shows off Arnold's physique. That's part of you see the power of the muscle and those sinews. And it's incredible. It's aspirational, right? Who has not done the bench press while listening to Anvil of Crom?
Right. And I think another fair point is that what's so fascinating to me is that in the last 40 years, we've watched this sort of, for lack of better words, a puritanical sentiment about chainmail bikinis and so on and so forth. It's gone from one political side of the spectrum to the opposite side of the political spectrum. And then I think you brought up Conan, and I think a great point to make here is they dressed Valeria the way that Barry Windsor Smith drew Red Sonja. She was fully clothed, and she wasn't in something skimpy, and she wasn't in something alluring. I mean, she was attractive, and there is this quality of mystery about her, but nobody was raising these issues with Frazetta. Nobody was protesting Boris. Nobody was raising these as demonstrative points in the 70s and 80s. And we can say that we're more enlightened, but I mean, Magic Mike sold a hell of a lot of tickets. I don't know how to tell you this, but there were a lot of people that bought the movie, that rented the movie, that watched the movie in the theaters. And I don't think it's just because they were there for the artistic, non-Fosse dancing.
I have the Blu-ray right here on my shelf that I like to pull out.
Good for you. So anyway, so how long did it take to pull Deathbringer together?
Well, I had dinner with a number of publishers who wanted to publish Deathbringer. And we went with Stephen Glicker and Roll for Combat because he's done a number of successful Kickstarters before.
Yep.
Because I don't think that in the education business, because I was a teacher for 30 years, we call it discovery learning. Where you put the kids in the group and they kind of make some kind of project and they don't know exactly what they're doing, but magic will happen. I don't think that running a Kickstarter and getting $1 million, that's the time for discovery learning. I want to make sure that people get a project. And actually where we're not 100% done because we have to play test it. It's got to go through rigorous play testing.
Sure.
And there is a manuscript. And we'll be play testing through the end of this year so that to make sure that this game is actually as good as it could possibly be. But Stephen Glicker is the one that gets the art and does the layout, and he's the one that commissioned those statues, and
really cool.
which I just saw at Gen Con. They were in the backer kit booth, the prototypes for those statues. So I wanted to make sure that we were able to do cool things, but actually provide them and get people a game relatively quickly. And that's and it's been poof. We first, I think, started a year ago about where we actually committed that we're going to do this together. So and the only reason it's been that fast is because he knows what he's doing, and Mark Seifter can write 10 error-free pages in a day. This is a very professional operation.
So somebody asked about the cost, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the basic Deathbringer book, the lowest level of the pledge is $125, which gets you the book as well as the PDF. Is that right, Dan?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
yeah, that's the physical. You can go lower if you want PDFs, but that's that's really the core physical. I mean, yeah. Go ahead, ignore me.
So I'm a very visceral person. I want to hold it in my hand. I want to turn the pages. I want to feel the weight of the tome crushing my lap. This is the sort of thing that I like about good RPGs. And $125. How many rough count pages do you think? Is it going to be in excess of 300?
I
Excess of 400?
I couldn't say, but it's not going to be that long. It's going to
Gotcha.
be like whatever. Hold on.
That's okay. We won't hold you to anything.
So Shadowdark is 316 pages, but I much prefer games like, I don't know if I have the Black Hack or Black Sword Hack around here. And Deathbringer, I would want to actually, one of the reasons Shadowdark is this thick is because it is very thick pages. I prefer a lean, mean book. I like Black Sword Hack. I like Mjörkborg,
Right.
where I like games that paint a picture in as few words as possible. So it's going to be quality and art over quantity.
So saying that leads me to sort of the next step as far as Deathbringer. You've been very clear that you have no intention of using any AI derivative art, and appreciate that. I appreciate the sort of stand on that. I think there's no shortage of talented artists. Are you leaning more? There's a lot of color on the backer kit page. Are you looking at doing full color throughout the book, or are you trying to do full color for inset pages with black and white through the book? What's your sort of intention on that?
That's a Steven question, but I want as much color as possible.
Gotcha. Right.
I want as much, because otherwise it would just be Shadowdark, right?
I feel like at the bottom of the pages there should be an ever expanding trickle of blood that, as you get to the end of the book, it washes over the page, and then
that's not a bad idea. We may steal that.
You're welcome to it. I'm infamous for these sorts of things. So, what do you want people to know? Like, this is another great question, right? We have folks on in the middle of a campaign, right? And we tend to have folks on after they've already sort of hit a plateau. And Dan, I think 1.1 million is a pretty good plateau. I mean, you're not done, but what do you say to the people who have not backed yet? What do you say to the people watching this? I think your audience is obviously much larger, and I think that's why you came out of the gate and just absolutely raffle stomped everything from the beginning. But what do you say to get people off of the fence and into the Deathbringer experience who have not made up their mind yet? Like what would you say to those folks?
Deathbringer is modular. So even if you don't use the whole game, if you have Shadowdark, if you like playing old school essentials, or the white box cyclopedia, or Beckme, or Mulve, you just want to play the original classic, you can take the Deathbringer concepts, import them into those games, and what you get is a plugin where you can play every old school module: Lost City, the Lost Shrine of Sajkam, Keep on the Borderlands, right? So it's compatible with all those things. It's like Hamburger Helper, right? You can use it, sprinkle it in your own game, take what you want, and you're going to get some cool charts and cool art.
And so I'm a Hamburger Helper guy. I had a lot of Hamburger Helper growing up, right? So what do you say to 5th edition? What do you say to 5th edition enthusiasts who are not quite as prepared for the Deathbringer experience as perhaps some of the old besotted people that are next to me on this channel? I mean, do you tell them to get ready for something that you've not experienced before? Do you say that with death comes finality, but with finality comes legend? What's the sort of pitch with this?
It's the least boring game of Dungeons and Dragons you'll ever play.
Oh, I like that.
Nice.
I'm a guy who wears out the phrase "you paid for the whole seat, you're only going to use the edge," but that's pretty good. That's pretty fabulous, right? And I saw a lot of things at Gen Con this past week, and I was surprised at how frankly tepid some of them were. I was really genuinely surprised at I saw, at night when I've collapsed back on the bed and I'm trying to recover from the day, I'd watch some of the videos and I thought to myself, you have a chance to really excite people about a product, and some of the live play that I saw just did not leave me like I didn't think I have to pre-order this immediately or send me to a website where I can pre-order this. I saw a lot of stuff that just frankly it left me cold, right? And that always makes me sad. I want to be excited about a project. I'm excited about Deathbringer. You said Thundar, and at that point, I was done, right? There's not a whole lot else. But so looking at the other classes in Deathbringer, what are you the most excited by that people just haven't sort of grokked onto yet? Is it the Plague Doctor, which I mean, it's got a pointy mask, Dan. You had me at pointy mask.
Well, the Plague Doctor actually won the poll for the favorite character. They're like part surgeon and part mad scientist, mixing up these crazy potions and chucking them as bombs. And so I think that people really dig that class. I think the Bounty Hunter is cool. That's our answer to the Ranger. And the Battle Nun is cool. Right? She is a holy warrior. She casts she can smite and cast protection from evil and that kind of stuff. She just can't heal things.
Right.
There's a lot of classes. What are there, 8 classes or something like that? So
Right.
I think they're cool. Again, you could use them with Shadowdark or as their own thing. But I think that while classes are cool, there's also like a character path that you create a background and a tragedy for your character. I think when it comes to making up characters, those are more interesting things to me. Like when I play a character, the first thing I think of is like, where do they come from? What do they want? What sets them off? What kind of tragedy set them on this path? What's their dark secret? That's to me what makes an interesting character, as opposed to
Right.
just the things that they can do, and because you have Deathbringer dice, a lot of it you're not locked into. Like your thief can make a massive, powerful strike, and a fighter can attack someone, can sneak attack, because you could use those Deathbringer dice. So there's the classes are more guidelines. I think it's very malleable. It's very spongy.
And you say spongy. Now, you've used that a couple of times. When you say spongy, what do you mean? Because when I hear you, I think it pulls in things from all sorts of other game systems to try to meld that into something. But what's your take on spongy? I'm very interested in your use of the word.
When you roll a 14 on a 20-sided die, and
Okay.
you add your strength, and you're like, it's a 16.
Right.
That is a static roll. That's what the number is. Spongy means, and you can't manipulate it anymore. With the Deathbringer dice, you can manipulate that roll. You can continue to manipulate it, right? So you avoid the problem of, oh, we needed to kill that guard in one shot, but we didn't do it. Or, oh, I really needed to jump that chasm, but I didn't do it.
Right.
So you're more likely to take risks and just chuck the dice because well, I have Deathbringer dice. So like I'll make it if I spend enough of them.
Sure.
I like a game that is malleable, where your character can succeed when you really want them to. We've all had that night where we can't roll over a 6. But if you save those Deathbringer dice to the end, that 6 could potentially become 24, and you could succeed. So that's what I like in a game. I like where players have the ability to manipulate the die rolls.
We talked about old school D&D, and a lot of the cut and driedness of D&D. There's still, even to this day, there's still some of that war game DNA in there. We played in the 70s. A lot of the war game DNA came about when you're like, okay, you rolled that. That's what the roll is. It's done, over, finished. There's no whatever, because that's how war games are played. There's a winner, there's a loser, there's no sponginess. This, you either did this or you didn't do this. And I think that went along with D&D for a while, but then we got, once we started having games like the Saga game for D&D, and we started having Call of Cthulhu did that a lot. Obviously, Vampire the Masquerade, my God, that's, spongy as spongy can be. But I think we became more interested in, okay, the dice said this, but how can we change the dice to say what we want to? Is it even possible to change the dice? And I think the farther we get away from the wargaming roots, the easier that is to happen. Because I'm sure you have a lot of people look at your game, Dan, and say, well, it's not fair. You rolled this. This is what you rolled. That should be it. You shouldn't be able to alter the mechanics with all these, special dice and special maneuvers and special actions.
Well, yeah, then it wouldn't be the game for you, because if you look at modern mechanics like advantage, disadvantage, inspiration, re-rolls like hero coins or whatever that allow you to
luck
re-roll.
Points in DCC.
Yep. Yeah, luck points in DCC. It's just more fun. It's just more fun.
It's a game. It's not a simulation. By the way, you do have a question. Will Deathbringer come out with its own module or modules? I'm assuming the answer is yes.
Oh yeah. Oh sure. Sure. And
fear not.
We've got so many. We've got quite a lineup of people that want to write for Deathbringer. So yeah, we will. You got to have adventures.
Right.
Well,
Dan,
you're a big fan of Shadowdark, and it seems like you have a really good relationship with Kelsey. And so, what attracted you to Shadowdark instead of just saying, "I'm just going to do my own game and start from scratch. This is going to be mine. I want, whatever I want to do, I can do." To saying, "Well, no, I can fit this into Shadowdark's framework."
So, funny story. Kelsey and I met through a mutual friend, Runehammer, again. And he said, we were drinking one night in Philadelphia, and he goes, you got to check out my friend Kelsey's game. She's my dungeon master. She's great. And she's got this game, Shadowdark. And I was like, oh, yeah, like it's an OSR game. Yeah, I've heard of it, right? I've seen the cover with the lizard man on it. And I said, I'll take a look at it. And she contacted me on Facebook privately, and she said, listen, I'm coming out with this game. Would you review it? And I was like, oh, man, another OSR game. Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll take a look at it, though, and I'll let you know what I think. So I read it. I got up to Cleric, and I was like, oh, man, this is what I wanted Deathbringer to be. This is what I was going for. And she's already written it. And so I gave a good review. The OGL thing happened. Me, Ben Milton at Questing Beast, we put out our reviews the same day, and the whole thing exploded. And it became a phenomenon, raising $1.4 million right out of the gate. And it really caught fire, right? Like even grognards, like you guys, I remember Eric picked it up and started playing it. And I never talked to you about Kelsey. I never tried to sell you the game. And it was just great. It's just the way it's written is fantastic. Mm-hmm. She really caught lightning in a bottle. And then I started thinking about what Dungeons and Dragons is and what all these other games are. What is Pathfinder? What is DCC? They are all Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons has ceased to be a game. It is a folk tradition, and it is a language. And different versions, when we say Beckme or Maldve or Menser or first edition, second edition, they are dialects of the same language. If you never played Pathfinder 2, if I showed you a Pathfinder 2 character sheet and you saw strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, hit points, armor class, it's the same thing. It's just the numbers in the ads, the bonuses, they're different, but it's the same language, right? And people are always asking, is this game compatible with this other game? Basic D&D was always compatible with advanced D&D.
Oh,
like the hit points are like two numbers apart, and I was always trying to say that on my YouTube channel. And it just occurred to me that if I make my own game, right, if it's too different from Dungeons and Dragons, it run the risk of people will buy it, but they won't actually play it. I had to make a decision. Do I want people to actually play this thing? And then I said to myself, I was working on stat blocks, and I found it so annoying. I kept looking at Shadowdark and the stat blocks and going back to it and thinking, you know what? It'd make a whole lot of sense if I just used Shadowdark stat blocks because she did it so well. Because so many people are into that game, and now it's become secondhand nature, right? It's a muscle memory. It's muscle
Yes.
memory. You look at that, and you mention the monster right away, armor class, hit points. It's all in the same place. And I'm like, why am I going to reinvent a wheel like that? Why don't I just make it compatible with Shadowdark?
I want to speak to something you said, right? So we've all collectively, all of us everywhere, have been talking about the Odyssey, and I had mentioned on the show I had minored in classical studies at Marshall University, which had a great classics department. But one of the things that's so striking about the Odyssey is that there are all these flavors of the Odyssey, right? There's one where Agamemnon kills his daughter. There's a flavor of the Odyssey where Agamemnon doesn't kill his daughter, and Clytemnestra does not kill Agamemnon because of that, et cetera, et cetera. And what you said really resonates with me because role playing, to me, the rules and the mechanics are the least important part of getting together, right? The most important part is actually bringing people to the table and crafting an adventure and setting people loose. And we tend to gravitate towards rule systems that make it easier to facilitate the story that we're trying to build and craft and tell. And so what you said about, the people that need to stick to AD&D, or the people that use BECME or Molde or Shadowdark and so on, again, I'm very, very much a systems agnostic person. And so I like what you said about that what we're hearing is just variations of a dialect, that at the heart of it, we're still all trying to accomplish the same thing. And these tangents of things are fine. But I like also too that not every wheel needs to be reinvented. I like that you can look at Kelsey's stat block and say, okay, I can build around this, and this could be the beating heart of my system, and I don't have to spend cycle after cycle after cycle coming up with something that again resembles the actuarial tables of AD&D or some of these other things. And it also brings me to a point. I saw a mechanic being discussed about a new role-playing game at Gen Con, where it's very clearly a forced notion that has all the hallmarks of trying to capitalize on the torch mechanic of Shadowdark, but absolutely feels contrived and sort of, it's Shadowdark-esque, right? It's got this sort of late night TV commercial feel to just the entire mechanic. And I just thought to myself, okay, I understand what you're doing here, but I'm not sure I'm a big fan of that. And so I really, I like that you said, okay, I can look at this and I can run with this. So I think that's just sheer genius on your part.
Yeah, I mean, like, why ask the audience to choose? You've already built this huge audience with Shadowdark. I don't want them to choose between my game and her game. I want people to use it with Shadowdark, and so that they can augment each other and both games can grow. And if you look at the games at Gen Con, if you look, and I'm going to have to do at some point my analysis, probably my review of the Annie Award winners. I will mention that so many games run on the same systems, right? So think about Mjörkborg, right? So the game Berserker was nominated for Annie. That's Mjörkborg. Vastgrim is Mjörkborg. Pirate Borg is Mjörkborg. They're all Borg. They're all Borgs. Right?
They were simulating. Oh, geez,
Yeah, they're very good. And then you've got Free League has their own system, right? It's a D6 dice pool system. All the Free League games use that system. You got Powered by the Apocalypse. You got Dungeons and Dragons, and then Chaosium has their system, like RuneQuest, Call of Cthulhu, Pendragon, Stormbringer, Elric. They're all working on that kind of percentile roll under system. You got about 5 different systems out there. Right. And what that does is it reduces the cognitive load on the player. It's like you look at a Stormbringer sheet, it looks like a Call of Cthulhu sheet. You immediately know kind of how things work. It's like the instrument panel on a car. And so, yeah, I just decided, you know what? I'm going to make, instead of doing my own thing, I'm going to make Shadowdark bigger. We're going to Borgify Shadowdark. And my prediction, and there already is a sci-fi version of Shadowdark. My feeling is that it will become, it'll just grow, and that's an easier way to get people into the system because it's like, oh, you've already played this game. It's
Right.
just it's this other game.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
just got a different flavor or suit costume on. It's wearing a different
Right.
costume, and that's a trend
Well,
I've
you
noticed in
mentioned
role-playing games.
you mentioned Gen Con, so we're gonna scoot over to Gen Con a little bit because you and Jim are both there. Jim is auctioneer of the big auction, and you were there as the MC. So I'm going to throw some questions at both of you. First of all, Dan. So Daggerheart seemed to be kind of the big winner. What do you think about Daggerheart and the mechanics of that and the awards it got?
Well, it wasn't the only big winner, right? Because Dolmenwood
Right.
was a big winner. Crooked Moon was a good winner,
Well
and
deserved.
Legend.
Dolmenwood's an excellent product, incredible.
Yeah,
product.
and Legend in the Mist. Legend in the
Mhm.
Mist was also a big winner, and Crooked Moon. They all won, I think, the same amount, like 5 medals or 4 medals and stuff like that. So there were a lot of winners, and I'm very happy for the Daggerheart team and Spencer Stark. Spencer was so excited to have won, and what do I think of it? I think it's. I could tell you that I counted up, or I had my assistant count up how many events were run from each game. That's going to be my next probably original video in 2 or 3 weeks. It's we tabulated who is playing what, how many people actually play these games, and Daggerheart is becoming more popular. It jumped something like, it went from number 14 or 13 all the way to number 6 or 8. So it is a more popular system. It's taking root. There's an organic, people enjoy that mechanic, and I think that that's great. That it is a very narrative game, and that's cool because you got more variety of games. And I was pleased too that an original system like Legend in the Mist could still, win and get attention. I'm going to be reviewing that system too because it uses a narrative. It uses tags, so you don't actually have to have an ability score and know all your numbers, which is kind of cool. So I'm very happy with the Annie Awards. I think it's cool. I'm very happy for Daggerheart.
Well, I think what I thought was interesting this year is we talk a lot about how, and we just talked last week actually when Jim wasn't here and just Eric and I, about you have all these winners, past winners, but nobody ever runs their games anywhere. I mean, they're good games. It's just that you never see them at conventions. I never see anybody run Coyote and Crow. I mean, it won all these awards, but it's not a very runnable game, I guess, at cons. And the one thing I did notice about Daggerheart, it does seem to be picking up a little momentum. I don't know if that's because the people promoting it are doing a good job of marketing and promoting, or people are really playing it. But unlike a lot of the past winners, I'm actually seeing that pop up at a lot of conventions.
Yes, and I can speak to that, and it's because they have very wisely built an infrastructure, and that's what I was talking about earlier. I wanted people to actually play my game. You can have a game that sells very well and it raises $1 million, and then it is quickly forgotten. What you need to have for the game to last, to have a long tail, is what they call it in business when it goes to direct sales and retailer, is you have to have people playing at conventions. So you have to build this infrastructure where you have a company running your game, and then people can be exposed to it. And then what you have to have is a grassroots situation where people actually want to design scenarios for that game and run them themselves at conventions. And that's what you're seeing with Daggerheart, and I hope it happens with Crooked Moon. Crooked Moon had a big room, and I hope that happens with Legend in the Mist as well. And every other game, you got to build that infrastructure. So that's one of the things we're doing with Deathbringer, is we're going to be working with a company called Lurking Fears so that they can actually run the game at conventions and we can get people playing it. But that is a whole dimension of creating a game. It's part of the game cycle that I'm not sure everyone was aware of until you see the success of Daggerheart, that you realize how important it is to get grassroots playing. That's a lot easier if it's a Dungeons and Dragons clone.
we've talked about the long tail on here a lot just because of my background, and one of the things we also have talked about is um, we look aggressively at tabletop events, at looking at conventions, and it's always striking to us to look at what's actually being played. And I don't mean by company sponsored. If you look at some conventions, you have company sponsored efforts to have a big slate of games. And if you do, you look at those events and you count how many butts are actually in the seats. But we always find it fascinating to actually look at conventions and see what people are organically bringing to the table.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One of the things that I'm always interested in is I want to see where the market is skewing. We obviously saw the rise of Shadowdark. We've seen an explosion of Call of Cthulhu across things. We talked extensively at one point about how nobody was running Pathfinder. And when you look at it, the only conventions that we saw running Pathfinder were officially sanctioned and Paizo backed efforts to game Pathfinder. But when you look at conventions and you break down when you go past the larger conventions where Paizo had a presence, nobody was playing Pathfinder. We talked about that a couple of months ago, 2-3 months ago. And I think you're right. I think the organic growth that you're talking about, which is not only does it have to get through the trade channels and get down to your local the friendly local game store, but you also have to inspire people to want to play it. And I don't just mean the Critical Role fans. You actually have to get, again, butts and seats at your kitchen table where people want to play Daggerheart, and the system has got that interest. I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today, and we were talking about it started last night, but we were talking about this is an industry with a lot of magpie syndrome at the consumer level, right? We see shiny objects, we get the shiny objects, we bring them back to our nest, and sometimes these things are never played. And I'm sad when I see it's a great game, but when I see it's just sort of a shiny object, and we wind up with shelves of things.
No.
That's where the rubber really meets the road. And I'm happy that I'm happy that Daggerheart has a ground game to try to foster this and try to get people playing this and so on and so forth. I think the number one mistake that we see from game companies time and time again, and creators, is that there is not an effort to sort of grow this. Now, there are exceptions. I've talked on the show about Goodman Games Road Crew and how it gets people playing DC.
They're probably the best at it, Jim.
They are the best at it, hands
absolutely.
down.
Yeah.
Of all the RPG publishers right now, they're the only one actively trying to create new customers in a way that is easily replicable, but nobody's actually doing it.
Because there's effort, Jim. Some people don't want to. There's a lot of effort involved in that. And
there is, but what I know, and what is one of the things about this industry that people have to realize: if you're not creating new customers, you're circling the drain, and it's just the time is what you're trying to do. Is you're just trying to forestall that, because if you're not creating new customers, you are simply waiting until your player decides to become the other company's player, and nobody wants that. I think Deathbringer is the perfect addition to Shadowdark's ecosphere. I think it's a great idea to have this as part of the ecosphere.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Well, Jim, I was going to say, so I wanted to ask you a question too, and of course, this is going to be my question to you. Obviously, is that what were the big ticket items at the auction? I'm curious. You know me.
I thought you were going to ask me about the Wizards of the Coast presentation that I was at.
Well, no. So I'm going to ask you. Well, we're all going to talk about that in a little bit. Let's just save that. Let's push that back off.
So the number one collectible item was I have a picture I could share, but we shouldn't put it up on the channel. So Larry Elmore in 1986, when Dragonlance was at its height, somebody's already posted on YouTube the video of me doing the last item from the convention from the top 10. But Larry Elmore did a illustration of Tika taking a bath.
Oh yes,
which is topless, and all these other characters are sort of spying on her and so on. So Larry made this, and the original is vanished. Nobody knows where this is. But what Larry would do is he'd wander into the art department and he would make a copy of it, and then he would personalize it. We knew of three. We knew of three that were out there in collections and so on and so forth. So a guy is standing in line on Wednesday, and he's getting ready to bring these things to the auction, and he's like, "Oh, I want to show you this." And I said, "Okay." And he's showing me all these things, and then he shows me this, and he says, "Now, I put a reserve on it of $1,200. Do you think that's too high?" And I was like, "You're going to be just fine." and I spent another couple of hours bringing people over to show this to people. And you can just, I just need to connect the bidders with the person selling the item, right? So on Friday night, it was the last item, and it went for $11,000, which is the second highest item in my 15, 16 years at Gen Con's auction. And that's a staggering amount of money for a photocopy, for a signed photocopy, right? But it takes two. And we got to $5,000, and then I started doing $500 increments. We got to $10,000, and I took it to $1,000 increments. And after I got to 11, the second bidder you could see the pain on his face, and he just caved. And so the winner was incredibly happy, was very, very excited about it. I think that it's very timely. Larry's birthday is today. Larry's 78, I think. He's in reasonably good health, and so I don't know if we'll see him on the convention circuit much more, but it was sort of nice that at a time where it would be nice to have Larry hear these sorts of things. A Larry Elmore photocopy went for $11,000 at the collectibles auction.
Jim, for 10 grand, you probably could get Larry to do a Katira taking a bath or something. I mean, 10 grand. 10 grand might buy you a lot of.
I'm sensing a Deathbringer taking a bath, right? Has the helmet, lots of chestiness with bubbles over the swimsuit area, and then you're good, right? This is B.
That's great. Oh man, I did not know that. But you brought up something, Jim, that I was going to save for later. Let's just go talk about it. What was the reaction to the announcement?
Which
several parts. There's several parts to this announcement, obviously.
So let me sort of. I saw that it was coming, and I realized I could probably take a break from the auction hall and get over there, and so I did. And I hobbled over with my cane and everything else. I think the biggest problem, and I've watched the video, I think the biggest problem with the video is that the theater wasn't mic'd, because sitting in the crowd, there were two unbelievably strong visceral reactions in the crowd that watching the video you don't get. Now I will say that there was a slice of the audience that was invites, or that were invited, right? So there was a pack of influencers. There was like a dozen influencers sort of set up with their little cameras on their little monopods, and they're trying to find a whispery corner where they can talk about their, okay. But for the most part, it was not all influencers or whatnot. Like, I saw a lot of just attendees who had a slot open and came in. So the first one was Dark Sun. And when they showed the trailer, like, there starts off with this kind of low moan, like, well, this is awfully bloody. And then everybody started putting two and two together, and there was just this explosive cheer. Now, I have seen some of the sort of clapback from the grognards of the internet, and I don't believe that, Dark Sun 4 years ago was never going to happen.
Right.
4 years ago, the people who were in charge of Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons weren't going to touch this with a 10-foot pole. And when you look at that position, and I think it was even as recently as 3 years ago, but when you look at where we are now, facing Dark Sun's imminent shrink-wrapped release, like, I hate that in some ways, because it's just a throwback to the Book of Vile Darkness, and what a terrible marketing idea that was. But looking at the illustrations that they put on the screen, looking at all of this, the reaction from the crowd was incredibly strong. Now, the one that surprised me, the second powerful reaction, was World of Warcraft. and and I think that's a very interesting bridge between two worlds. Now, WoW has had a steady subscriber decline for quite a while, but all those people who've been playing WoW over the last 20 years have kids. And all those people who put in all that time on raids like Onyxia or Black Temple or God help us Ice Crown, they remember all of that in a way that 15, 20 years worth of time has passed, and introducing their children to what they loved about WoW, because you can't run WoW with your family in the World of Warcraft environment. And so when that came up, I was really surprised because the audience lost its shit and was all in and excited and whooping and hollering. And I'm like, and my God, like they even did the stupid, are you Alliance? And there were a few people, and he said, how about the Horde? And 2/3 of the audience just went nuts. And so I really was surprised by that. I was really taken aback. And I think that the last piece, the little sort of, Darth Vader walks out, turns on the lightsaber, breathes a bunch, and then goes off screen. We had all heard the rumor that they were going to do Star Wars, but I think it's pretty landmark. They've done some fairly smart things. The properties that frankly they don't want their design studio to touch, that they don't want the Wizards design studio to meddle with, they've slung off and are going to do this under icons under Joe. I like that as an idea because it gets properties that frankly, after we look at the Vecna adventure and we look at the rehashes of things, fine, take this away and give it to people who love it. And that's where the third party publishers come in a big way. Like, I love the idea that we're going to see new Greyhawk, new Fanner, Forgotten Realms, et cetera, et cetera. I like that you're throwing all this to third party publishers to run with. Now, I have some questions about some of the third party publishers they've chosen to team up with, but whatever. I thought the entire thing was a dog and pony show, and I knew it was going to be a dog and pony show. I understood why they had everybody on the stage that they did. I understood why Tracy Hickman spoke. I understood why Joe was there. I understood the Dark Sun presentation, because having that sort of flash video is exactly what Workshop does whenever they have something that's big and coming through the pipeline. But I come back to, this is not what Wizards has done for decades. And they've made it very clear.
Well, they wouldn't even show up for Gen Con for years.
Gen Con is now their launch point for the following year.
Yeah.
That they're going forward with this in a way that frankly is great. Now, there were a bunch of missteps. They put this stuff on the calendar way too late for people to get it into their Gen Con schedule the way they should have. All these events should have been with when you started to get ticketing to games. The off-site tower, the D&D tower thing, I understood the concept, but it was a bit of a mess. When the tornado hit Indianapolis, it was a mess.
Oh dear. Yeah.
The drone show, I never saw it. I was inside. I was doing the charity auction, but it was supposed to have been cool. But okay, that's cool. But like them or not, Wizards is back at Gen Con in a way that they haven't been forever. And the very fact, and I think this is lost on a lot of the, I see every portmanteau for Wizards of the Coast that you can imagine. And I see people rail about this, but Dark Sun was dead. Dark Sun was dead. 4th edition Dark Sun was the last Dark Sun content that we had. And up to 3 years ago, they were like, we aren't touching this with a 10-foot pole.
Oh, they said that in articles, yeah.
It went from that to, this is a major product launch. This is where we're going with this in 2027. And that's pretty extraordinary. I mean, that's an about face. Whether you believe anything that came from the stage, they've committed to Dark Sun in a way that frankly surprises me. So I'm happy.
Yeah, I think, Jim, what's interesting is the fact that and we have done our paid our dues ragging on WotC the last few years. They're just total ignoring of Gen Con. Oh, we don't need to go to Gen Con. What's important, that's not important. And their lack of any new material and their lack of any kind of projects coming forward. There's just no excitement. I mean, the whole 50th anniversary, we've talked about that time and time again about how that was just an absolute fiasco.
I'm
we don't really have anything. I really don't have anything going on.
I'm going to invoke the Arduin back scratcher. So let me invoke my Arduin back scratcher.
You don't have this, Dan. We're gonna have to.
You need to get one of these, Dan. These are life saving. So I'm going to invoke the back scratcher. So I saw something in the Dark Sun trailer and an announcement that really, it raised all the hackles in my neck. And so somebody in the comments just said, on what planet does WotC not make something lame, et cetera, et cetera? So one of the things I noticed is that there's, Dark Sun, one of the fundamental pieces about Dark Sun is this is a wasted, every resource sucked up, no metal having world setting. And one of the things I noticed was that I was like, hey, wait a minute, that looks like metal. And that looks like metal. And that dude's got a halberd. And hold on a second, right? Because metal was always supposed to be this impossibly rare resource in Dark Sun. And so I know a couple of guys at Wizards of the Coast, and I fired off a text and was like, tell me what this is. Like explain to me how Dark Sun has metal, because if it does, you're going to lose everybody. Like before it even launches, you're going to lose everybody. And he said, well, we're going to dive into this as we go forward, but it's not all metal. That you have essentially glass, you have other substances, blah, 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 that some of what you're seeing is not metal suits of armor, but something else. And I said, okay. And I said, but like, where are the cities that were the linchpins of Dark Sun? And he said, well, what we're trying to do is advance the setting. We're trying to advance where we were going forward. And he said, and there's a lot of this work. And so, like, the people who hate WotC hate WotC. They hate them for any number of myriad reasons, some of them valid, some of them not so valid. And I think eventually, like all RPG products, when this comes out, you can decide if you want to use your money and buy it, use your money and not buy it. I don't know, but again, I loved Dark Sun back in the day. I have all sorts of Dark Sun tucked away and read it all ruthlessly and religiously and so on. I get the concept that they're using something else besides metal. If you're familiar, I've talked about it before, but Julian May's Saga of Palaeocene Exile, because iron and steel will kill the exotics, everybody is head to toe in glass, in vitriol or whatever it is. And so that's like, I've already got my head around that as a concept. I can sort of see that. So I think we have to wait and see. They're going to launch as they get closer and closer to the product launch. They're going to do deep dives into all of this. We'll get more. We all have more questions than we will have answers.
Can we give A for effort, though? I mean, that's my whole thing. Is
yeah, I
don't like WotC. I don't buy any WotC products. I don't. I'll be honest with you. I don't plan on buying anything that I saw. I was happy for the announcements, but as big a fan as I am of Greyhawk, I'm not going to like their Greyhawk. I know that, but this is an A for effort because their effort the last few years has been abysmal. There's no effort. There's been zero effort to do anything last years.
Well, and I think again, right? I've said this before. I certainly have a better sense of. I have a better feeling from the current president of D&D than the last, however many presidents. Count as many fingers as you want, and I think we can say that it's been low effort. 5th edition was a remarkable success. 5th edition was a remarkable success, perhaps in the face of management, but they let 5th edition happen. And 5th edition created more customers and raised the boat for every single RPG publisher. Dan, how many people do you run into or subscribe to the channel? What sense do you have that they started as 5th edition and they discovered other things?
I couldn't say.
Sure.
I could not say.
I think
it must be a big amount.
Sure. And I think for exactly what you said, right? They get tired of baby bumpers after a while.
Right.
And just like 1980, 82, where we had this just massive influx of people who got the basic set and the expert set, Before Beckme became Beckme, it was just BE. And after that, we had a lot of people who gravitated towards other things. And this is what saw the RPG industry as a whole go up higher, because they had all these people and so on and so forth. So I don't know. What else you got, Mike? What other questions?
I was
want
gonna
to
ask Dan,
see my greatest purchase
Dan,
at the auction? Sorry, go ahead.
Cons, have you been?
Say that again.
Oh, dude. I was going to ask Dan what. So I don't know how many. I don't know how many Gen Cons Dan's been to. What did you play in any games? I know you ran some games. I saw the game you ran. Did you actually play in anything or see any seminars?
Yeah, I played in 2 live plays. I play tested Death Saves with Mike Merles, Joe Manganello, and Dottie from Mystic Arts and Limithron, author of Pirate Borg. So I was actually on the stage at the D&D Tower. And I also did a live play called Sentinels of the Shieldless. It was for charity. Luke Gygax was the game master.
I heard about that.
I did play games, but they were in front of an audience.
So Stephen Glicker had a comment that Dan Ayub had to throw basically things together in very little time. So it was a bit rushed, but amazing. And he expects D&D will be better organized with Gen Con for next year. And I would expect that because, Dan, like was mentioned, Dan had to come in with, nobody holding the ball for him when he came in. It's kind of like,
we should start from scratch. I mean, basically from scratch.
Yeah, basically from scratch. Yeah. And I give him a lot of credit for going to GaryCon and engaging with the community. I've gotten messages from so many people in the gaming community that frequent the tavern, and they're like, it was just amazing that somebody from WotC with that much influence was actually talking to members of the community to get feedback. So,
Eric, you know who our friends are, who my friends are. And of course, after the announcement, all I heard was, well, it's going to suck. I mean, Dark Sun's going to suck, and Greyhawk's going to suck. And on. I'm like, but do you understand where we've come from? We've come from them trying to shut down the OGL and basically a whole line of people that were working for Apple and Microsoft. They had no clue what even an RPG was. They thought it was a kind of a video game. And we're getting we're getting something from these guys. That's so much better than what we got years and years ago. And so that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the fact that they're actually trying now. There's somebody there, and they're trying, and they're saying, look, we know people like Greyhawk. We're going to bring back Greyhawk. We know people have been asking about Dark Sun for a long time. And as you said, Jim, they were not going to bring back Dark Sun. They didn't want to mess with cannibalistic hobbits and slavery and whatever else.
The very fact that Dark Sun's on the schedule, let alone the premiere release for next calendar year, where they are devoting serious crafting energy to this. The fact that it's come that far that fast, this is a sea change. And my guess is, again, this is my guess, but you're talking about 18 months to 24 months. We've talked about this before, 18 months to 24 months to develop a product between idea and sketching it out and getting it to the retail stores. And so if you look at the fact that Dan Ayub started at Wizards of the Coast just before Gen Con last year. And what we're talking about is a product that probably, my guess is, will launch at Gen Con next year, right? That's what I would do. And that's a 2-year cycle, which means that shortly after Dan Ayub got to Wizards of the Coast a year ago, he said, we're going this way. And this is what we're doing, and this is what we're going to release. And that means that in less than 2 years after they said, oh, no, we'll never touch this, they're doing this instead. Now somebody invoked the Rob Kuntz in the comments. And if you say his name 3 times, he appears in a cloud of Marlboro.
Cloud of smoke,
right?
Cigarette smoke, yeah.
Unfiltered
cameras.
Yeah. I think that Rob has the benefit and luxury of having been one of the people at TSR and having played with Gary and so on. But at the same time, I think if I was one of the third-party publishers that is going to be working with Wizards of the Coast and wanted to do something Greyhawkian, Rob Kuntz doesn't need to do it under his own label. Why would you not pull him in to be a part of this project? And so it's not that I'm not for Rob Kuntz contributing to Greyhawk or a Greyhawk product, but at the same time, let's not have Rob try to do it all by himself. Just as other companies are smart enough to pull Ed Greenwood or Mike Merrill's in on other things, a la Death Saves, why would you not just reach out to Rob Kuntz and say, hey, let's pull you in on something else? So I just wanted to throw that out.
Rob was notoriously hard to work with, and I say that as a friend of Rob. I've known Rob a long time.
I wasn't going to say it.
He was an original guest in Texas.
Rob has a
He's
very
he's very hard to work with, and I mean, he and Gary knew each other their entire life, and they couldn't even work together longer than 5 months on Castles a Gig, and they had to part ways. So I would be very. I mean, Rob is an incredibly entertaining, incredibly creative personality. He really is.
So I think I see a couple of flamingly wrong comments that I'm just going to address, and we're probably going to go long tonight, so I don't care. The stuff will come out digital first. Oh, hell no.
No.
They've made it very clear that the retailers and trade are important. And so no, seeing this digital first, like that's a non-starter. That's just, if I'm wrong, I'm going to make a Werner Herzog. I'm going to make the bet. If I'm wrong and they release it as a digital first, like a month early or 3 weeks early or whatever, I'll eat my shoe. So go ahead, but I think that's just.
There was a question for Dan a little earlier. Eric, did you see that? It was, dear Professor DM, can you have time to answer? Why do you think so many younger players are now willing to play OSR and new SR? I don't like new SR. I don't like that RPGs being younger players to us older players. What changed? I mean, have you noticed that, Dan? I mean, you had a lot of the younger players coming in willing to give new games a try and not just sticking with 5e.
It's really tough for me to gauge that because when I go to conventions, I mostly see older people. So I don't know that younger players are into it, but I always recommend like Shadowdark or Old School Essentials to my younger players because I've worked up until I retired from school. I always say start here because they're just easier to game master. It's way easier to game master Old School Essentials or Shadowdark than it is Dungeons and Dragons. And then you could always get more complex if you want, which is how I did it with basic D&D and then moving to advanced D&D. It's just way easier to game master. Eric?
I would go along the same way too, because if you're going to be an effective GM, you have to have mastery of the rules. And OSC or Shadowdark is a lot easier to get to the point where you don't need to flip for everything as opposed to 5e. I've played 5e, not often, played it at cons, and when you hand me an 8-page character sheet, I'm going to go with what's in front.
Here's your backstory, sir.
No, it wasn't even backstory. It was 8 pages. Listen, it was Snoopy. It was the Peanuts Gang versus the Great Cthulhu. It was a great adventure. I had fun. I was Snoopy, but I kept on asking the DM, listen, I just tell me what I can do. Because if I read this 8 pages, that's half the session.
I think there's a fundamental difficulty though, because at least one of the systems that you talk about, I get to a lot of retail stores. I get to a lot of great game stores. And so, yes, like Games Plus outside of Chicago would probably have OSE. But my local store where I am, they don't carry OSE.
Mine does. Mine just carries no.
And so I think again, right, where the rubber meets the road is availability.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, one of the things that's the lowest barrier point of entry is, can they reliably find something? Like, I know that we've talked about the basic D&D set and what we would like to see it be, the box set, but my local comic book store has it in the front of the window. And they don't have OSE, and they don't have DCC, and they don't have whatever else you want to name. But by God, they've got that basic set right in the front window by the door so that you see it when you're standing there waiting to get in before when they open on New Comic Wednesday. And I think that's an important point. I see there's also some talk in the comments about pattern recognition. And what I would say about WotC and pattern recognition and behavior is we're seeing an exception. We're seeing a fundamental break between the prior pattern of previous regimes And
A
I
lot of
like
those people
that
were
word.
a lot of those people were gone, Jim. Too. They have to
Yes,
understand.
yes.
A lot of
Like
people-
the idiot that shot his mouth off about Dark Sun and shot his mouth off about other people is not there anymore. Now there is the fellow who had his hand on the introduction of the history of D&D. He's still there.
I like that
but-
we're not naming names. That's good. That's good for us.
But
And Dan doesn't want to be linked to it.
but really and truly, I think that's the other thing is
He
that
doesn't want to know what we.
we're talking about something. I mean, the very event at WotC, their presence, the very event at Gen Con, the fact that they're there and so on and so forth. I don't think anybody, it's not an apologist saying, oh, look at what they're doing. This is simply look at what they're doing. Like they haven't done this. They haven't done this in decades. For years, they have farmed out sales of Wizards of the Coast product to Gale Force 9 for quite a number of years. And then they farmed it out to other people and they didn't care. And so like, again, we're in uncharted territory from prior regimes. And regime is really the best way to describe it because every time we've had a president of D&D, they've had a little fiefdom. They've run it like a little fiefdom. They've surrounded themselves with people who are amenable to their sort of worldviews. And the problem is that this is created where they were. So we'll see.
I always like when we get a new president, and the first thing they have to tell us is how they played D&D when they were a little kid, and it's the fakest story you've ever heard. You're just like, just stop. Don't tell me the fake story.
I use AI at my game table all the time.
I played with my brother when I was I remember when I was like 8 and he ran it. Like, just stop. I don't want to hear your story about
We're the chainmail bikini of OSR podcast. That might be my favorite comment of the night. I like that.
Dan.
Sure
Dan
means Eric's wearing it or Mike is. I'm not sure.
Oh, we don't want me wearing it.
I don't
Trust
know.
me.
So Dan, tell me something. We all had a collective gasp of happiness when you mentioned Savage Sword. What reading material? Your Appendix N, your fantasy blueprint. What were you really into when you were younger?
Appendix N.
Really? You took all. See, because I was a kid, I wrote them all down. And I went to the bookstore and I tried to find everything in that dang Appendix N list. Same thing. Same thing.
I loved Michael Moorcock. I loved Michael Moorcock's writing, and I loved Fritz Leiber's
Those are my top two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, and so many great stories, such a huge impact on D&D. Those are my favorite. Of course, Howard. But I think that Fritz Leiber was so funny, and Michael Moorcock so dark and apocalyptic. You know, so
yes.
those would be
multiverse before anybody else, and
that's right, multiverse before
Burroughs,
we invent the multiverse and chaos and everything.
Burroughs was for me, all the Mars books and Pellucidar, et cetera, et cetera.
I always loved what I thought was cool about Leiber reading as a kid is it seemed like a D&D adventure. Fafhrd the Mouse. Every time I read it, it was like they were having a D&D adventure. I love that.
Yes.
Huge influence. What I was going to say about Dan Ayub, did anyone? Almost nobody's talking about John Haidt, the president of Wizards of the Coast, just resigned.
Yes,
That's how successful this D&D launch was. Ayub's launch. Everyone, the news that the president resigned, it's just like
it was swept under the rug. We mentioned it last week, Mike and I, but it didn't make any real gaming news. No huge treatment. Yeah, right before Gen Con, right before the big. That's my time to leave. That which tells you where he actually was at this point in the decision making. I don't think he was.
Yeah, we did talk about that last week of the show, and mostly along the lines of this is how unsuccessful the video game part of but the thing is, they're pivoting, which a successful company will do. They're pivoting. Okay, well, video game did not work out like we thought because he was brought on originally because he worked for Bethesda and he was going to. Or I'm sorry, Blizzard or Bethesda. It was Blizzard, right? Blizzard, and he was going to work through their video games, and it didn't work out. Everything hit a roadblock. Nothing worked. the contracts. I mean, everything just fell
I
apart.
would throw out something, which is if you were at Gary Con and you watched Chris Cox and Dan Ayub, they got along famously. And they were very, very, very in sync. You would see the two of them together. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of layers between Dan and Chris Cox, but I've said before on this show, Dan's got a couple of years of hands off. Like Hasbro's given him a chance to write the vessel. I've got some great funny stories about stuff that's gone on over the last few years internally. I've got stuff I can't talk about because I promised people I wouldn't, but I think we're going to have a lot of fun. I think we're going to have a lot of fun over the next couple of years because things have changed drastically at our friends in Renton. And we'll see, if they succeed, it's just better for the industry, right? I see all the negative comments. I see Wizbro. I see all the rest of this. And I think to myself that you're really losing sight of this, right? We have Dan's backer kit is at $1.1 million. We now, over the last few years, have had RPG crowdfunded projects that have all done more than $1 million, which if you had asked me this 10 years ago, right, when Kickstarter was still fairly new, longer than that. But if you had asked me that then, I mean, we would be mind boggled to think about this. But the industry has grown and grown and grown to the point where Dan has a phenomenally successful Kickstarter because there is an audience for this. There is a passionate audience that wants to spend money. Dan nailed a really great point. We see a lot of old guys at conventions, and that's because 13-year-olds can't afford Gen Con. They can't afford the tickets, they can't afford the rooms, they can't afford the travel, and if they show up with somebody's parent, their parents. You know who brought his kid to Gen Con? Dan Ayub. And his son was running all over the place. And I saw him a couple of times. You don't bring your kid to Gen Con and inflict Gen Con on them if they're not interested in what's going on at Gen Con.
That's a great point. I was going to say, Jim, that's a great point because we talk a lot about the success of smaller cons in the last few years. And a big part of that is just the fact that smaller cons, Nortex included, are flexible in terms of you're only spending $100 for a weekend versus whatever you're spending at Gen Con, San Diego Comic Con, Dragon Con, these bigger cons that have basically priced the market out, or like Gary Con. I mean, Gary Con's a great con, but good luck getting a ticket or a room at this point. I mean, it's become almost impossible.
Yes, kids can't afford Gary Con unless their parents bring them.
Sure,
and kids can't afford Gen Con in any way, shape, or form. And I think again, I think a successful WotC raises all boats, right? Because if Dark Sun is a hit, then this opens the door for, we can always make jokes about Lamentations of the Flame Princess, but they're an established entity that has been selling adult content now for a decade or more. And we can look at Dark Sun as blowing the doors open, where we can start to address some of the themes in Dark Sun that 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, were absolutely verboten. We will never come near any of this. And now we can have adult conversations in the room instead of restricted conversations. And I'm a fan of that. I think the market will dictate what the market will dictate is successful.
Wow.
Sorry, Dan. You awake? I feel like we've put you to sleep.
I think Danny knocked it out of the park.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And somebody's like, Wizbro is Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. I'm like, yeah, I got that. I'm not that thick, but I think you're right. I think he absolutely nailed it. I thought it was a hell of a person.
Yeah, this is a guy that's a gamer.
Yep.
And he knows he's got his, and I was pleased that they went.
Yes.
That's why I go to conventions, so that I can gauge like what people are into.
Yeah.
I was struck by how many. I don't know if you noticed this, Jim, about when you go to the exhibition hall, how many cozy core games there are. That's a huge trend. Cozy this and cozy that, and games about cats and baristas and stuff. And you look at that and you're like, well, that's a trend. Now it's not It's not a trend that I'm interested in. But as somebody in, who's in this and covering the business aspect, it's something I notice.
Yes.
And I think that there's no question that the success of a Shadowdark or a Deathbringer or D&D hardcore mode, or a Lamentations of the Flame Princess, somebody like a Dan Ayub is going to notice that and be like, well, we're leaving a lot of money on the table. There's clearly
Exactly.
adults that want to play
Yes.
these games. And
there's a question. There's a point. Greyhawk needs to be a hit if we're going to have younger gamers. I'm sorry, but Greyhawk is to service us old guys. The
Yeah.
greatest story I heard about the presentation sums up exactly this, right? That there was a grandfather, father, and grandson, all three in the audience. And the very first thing that they came out with when they talked about Greyhawk, the grandfather was like, "Oh my God, yes!" And then when they talked about World of Warcraft, the son, the father, was like, "Yes," because that's what he had really invested time in. And then when Darth Vader came out, the grandson was like, "Yes." And I think that's an interesting point because I think Wizards has figured out, we'll see, but I think Wizards has recognized that saying this element of your audience is unacceptable and we don't want you to buy our games and this element's too old and we're not going to have anything for them. I think this strategy, and I don't think it's a strategy, I think it's myopic, but there has been a very clear abandonment of this philosophy, and they're really having something for everybody. And Greyhawk is not how you create new customers. Greyhawk is there to service people who are
Right.
like Eric and Mike and myself and Dan and who are familiar with all of that. I think Deathbringer, I'm trying to tie this in, Dan. I think Deathbringer is exactly what the market needs to continue Shadowdark's growth and expansion as an ecosphere. I think Wizards has figured out that you have to have entry. I think you have to have serving mature gamers, and then you have to have something serving very mature gamers. And I think they've covered these bases. Now, will Star Wars be a success? No clue. Will Dark Sun be a success? No clue. But I think the presentation shows a fundamental sea change in management. And that's what we've all been praying for. And
Yeah.
I see comments about older game settings, but that has nothing to do with the current state of the ground game, right? And I think that's an important thing to remember in the back of your head. Wow.
Stephen Glicker has. If you watch my interviews with Dan, they're going after multiple segments and giving something for everyone. Not that everything they do will be for everyone, but they have something for all. That channel is Roll for Combat, by the way, folks. If you're subscribed to my channel, you're not catching Steven's stuff. He's been on top of stuff. I've been following him since the OGL fiasco. We were both on top.
Yeah. And here's the thing: what defines success? I hate to break it to people, but it's not about we resurrected Greyhawk for one or two products, or we resurrected Dragonlance, and we haven't even mentioned Dragonlance.
Oh yeah,
right? But Dragonlance, my God, the single biggest sea change at Gen Con that I saw was I held the new novel in my hand, and the cover art did not make my eyes want to fall out of my head and roll around.
Was it drawn by professional artists?
They got the right person to do the cover.
Whoops. Yeah, that was.
And again, like, this sounds dumb that we're even saying this, but what defines success is sales. I hate to break it to you. You may have the greatest RPG in the world, you think, but unless it sells, it's not the success. You may have written the masterpiece, but we don't have time for 200 years for somebody to come around.
But Jim, it goes beyond sales, because I'll give you an example. I'm not picking on it, but I'll just give you an example. Tales of the Valiant. Tales of the Valiant raised over $1 million. Nobody plays Tales of the Valiant. I mean, was it a success? Sure. It made over $1 million. Does it have any kind of long tail? I don't have a clue, because I never seen anybody play it.
Let's talk about Amber. Let's talk about the Amber diceless role-playing game, which everybody loved. And where is it now? Right.
Well, Dan, bring this back to you then. Where do you see? Let's go 5 years. Where do you want to be with Deathbringer in 5 years? I mean, I hate to put that on you because you probably don't know where you're going to be in a year, but
Now, actually, it's actually pretty clear where we're going to be. We got to go through play testing, layout. We got to get the actual game to everybody. Then we go to direct sales. Then we go to retail sales, and that is going to take us through 2027. And then we're going to follow the pattern set by Kelsey, which is she followed up Shadowdark with Western Reaches, which is a campaign setting. And we are going to move toward expanding.
it sounds like you have a
that
plan, which
world.
I like.
Yeah. And then that becomes a Kickstarter and playtesting, and then direct and a retail and running at conventions and so on and so forth. So it's actually a 4-year plan. 4 years of my life has been planned. We got 2 cycles of books.
Well, and come on, Dan, you're off to a hell of a great start.
I'm going to be working. I've retired from
Dan.
Thank you.
You retired,
I
right?
Retired
Correct?
from the New York City, and I retired from New York City, and now I have an exciting new job, which
There you
I'm
go.
working full
You
time
created your
for
own
the
job.
next 4
That's the
years.
best.
But you're working for
created
yourself
your own.
now. It's so much different, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
Eric spent years just
Kinda.
sitting at a desk. I don't know what waiting on the retirement police officers do, but he had enough time to post on his blog all the time, so he wasn't doing too
I was
much.
posting on my blog 5 times a day when I was working.
From the patrol car.
No. I brought my own laptop to my desk because I couldn't use the work computer. I'm on meal, but I'll take it at my desk. I'll handle phone calls, but I'll post. Yeah, I was.
You're working harder now than you did your last 5 years in that job. I'm sorry, man. You're working way harder now. And by the way, congratulations on 15,000 subscribers.
Thank you.
I remember when you and I were excited when we had 50 one day.
I remember hitting 500.
Eric, we got 50 people watching us. I don't know why.
We got 100. We got 127 right now. So
that's incredible. Wow.
So Dan, how much longer does the backer kit run?
It goes till the 13th, the 13th of August.
Right. So we talked about what you would say to people earlier in the show. What and you talked a little bit about what the future would hold. I guess the question is, we've talked about the origin, we've talked about how you sort of put your creative team together. What's the one thing we haven't touched on that you really, really need people to understand about Deathbringer?
Hold on, you cut out for a second. So what's the one thing?
I'm sorry, what's the number one thing we haven't covered
that I
tonight?
want people to understand about it?
Yeah.
I think we covered it pretty much all. I think we did a good job of covering the whole thing. Right. I think that some people there are people that just aren't going to like WotC. Right. They're never going to forget him.
We are aware.
I would point out that, I would point out that Luke Gygax forgave them and is working with them, and Mike Merles forgave them and he's working with them. But if you just can't find it in your heart to forgive WotC, you can back Deathbringer.
I like that. Folks, the link is on the bottom of the screen. If you're watching this on a replay,
That's
you can
right.
just type that in. I've put the links into the live chat a couple of times. We've had about a couple of dozen hits on the live link. So I'll tell you right now, I'm back at 125, but Roger from CNY just messaged me and he's all in. I don't know what all in is at. I'm afraid to ask. I'm afraid to ask Roger. But that might be there just to pressure Dan to come to CNY, Central New York Con next June. I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm not saying it's pressure, but he asked me to ask you. It was in a chat. I mean, I'm asking. But yeah, we threw it out there. But this was great. I mean, I honestly, we have gone into a little overtime here, and this has been an exceptional live stream and a very, very active chat. So thank you all.
Man,
thank
please support this game because this is Jim and Eric and I talk about this all the time. I hate to say it, but the future of the OSR is the future of gaming is the OSR. It's great that WotC has the standard bearer with 5e, but it's all the stuff happening underneath 5e that's really where it's at. I mean, I'm much more excited about stuff like Shadowdark, or Deathbringer than I am, anything that Watsy's doing. So
DM Knucklebones, I'm going to say thank you from Dan for 250 backer. Excellent, thank you. But no, this was great. It was a lot of fun. Dan, you're always welcome to come back. We'll always find a seat for you.
Dan will never come back after tonight.
He's done. He's like, oh god.
guys, oh my god.
Yes, folks, like you said, we didn't give him questions ahead of time. There was no script, So, thank you to Mike as always, Jim, everybody in the chat, especially those that threw a few bucks into the tip jar. Greatly appreciated. And next live stream is going to be Saturday night. Myself and Rach, Gamers Health. So, other than that, thank you all.